All right, here we go. So here are the questions we've received so far. Most popular one, I'm going to start there. Steve and Russ, you said that you apply the same strategies on WMAs and forestry lands. I've heard from some biologists that DNR WMAs and forestry lands have different roles. So should they be considered and treated differently? Any comments from the two of you on that?
I'll take a swing first, Steve, if you don't mind. I think that they are treated differently. I mean, we have different standards for them to begin with. Rotation ages, reserve size, things like that. I guess what I took from, and that's probably what I took from the way Steve said that, or the way that was presented by both of us, is that I think that it's a great thing about the Aiken Forestry Office, or the people that I work with anyway. Maybe all offices are this way, but they have, in their hardwood stands, it's just approach a hardwood stand. They have quite a suite of approaches to it, to management in it, and they're not strong cookie cutter foresters, and so they do listen to the concerns, and they do try to take different approaches, and thinking like a Venn diagram, they're trying to get as much as they can, into that positive part, those commonalities and the issues that are, maybe most concerning, or most highest order. And I also would say that, so I mean, it's kind of hard to answer a question like that, because every stand and every area and site is different. But another thing that I've noticed with them, and I tried to say that with the bat, and with the bat tree, I probably should have done that better, is that they bring those wildlife concerns, or EWR concerns, or fisheries concerns. Just because it's a concern on a WMA area, we're talking about den trees, or we're talking about conifer preservation in stands. They bring that over to forestry administered lands, certainly to the extent possible. I mean, we all know that there are constrictions and different issues with trust and con and full ownership sites, but that'd be my attempt at that question.
Steve, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Russ hit it pretty good. Yeah, I guess that was basically my intent. I mean, aside from some slight differences on rotation ages and the percent of reserve retention on, say, forestry land versus wildlife lands, I think Russ hit the nail on the head that we are looking for the same benefits across the landscape. Not looking at, that'd be kind of the only two things we look at, in terms of boundary lines between ownerships, but everything else, I think we do well on carrying across the landscape.
Great, and there's a reply there. If you're not familiar with Slido, you can click on a question, or you can see replies. If you click on the word replies, you can see what's there. Heather Baird weighed in that I think the collaboration and management happens differently in different areas depending on staff, ownership, and so on. So management is not always easy when different needs are required. Russ touched on this some. Yeah, and this has been a good story we've heard this morning, and I think often it does work well, but we've also heard stories about some tension about competing objectives, and this is to be expected too. It's part of the process of working things out, and I know that those can get contentious, and it can be tough to balance competing objectives. So I think Heather's right, and good thoughts. So let's go on to the next question. It's about fire effects. Let's try that. What sort of fire effects? This is again for Steve and Russ. What sort of fire effects are you seeing in hardwood stands in the Aitkin area? What sort of wildlife responses have been observed?
I guess I can start with this, Russ, and then you can jump in. In terms of the fire effects, we're trying to maintain a relative low intensity, just backing fire. We're looking for, generally speaking, in the burns we've done the last couple of years, we're looking for brush, looking for competition, to kill the competition of the sugar maple and ironwood predominantly, to set it up for some regeneration management, coming up in the near future. So generally trying to keep low intensity backing and flanking fires and not getting too intense to affect any of the canopy. And then Russ, you want to touch on the rest of it? I think you got yourself muted yet.
I double muted me, so I had it on my headset and on this, which is probably good. But some of those first order fire effects that we're seeing are I mean, it's pretty. We don't have strong numbers. Forestry's doing a good job going out there looking at regen. So I think in a few years we'll start seeing these regen counts. Hopefully showing a reduction in the species that we're trying to reduce, and especially if in oak that we're seeing the recruitment coming. But they really are marked differences. I mean, when you drive by, even if you didn't know that it was burned, if you're a forester or wildlife person, I mean, if you're an ecologist, you're going to drive by one of these sites and you'd look and you'd think something happened right there. And 3-4 years down the road is what we're seeing. 3 and 4 or 5 years later, you drive by and you'll be like, that patch of forest looks different. And as far as the wildlife responses, it's too early, I think. A lot of these, because we're talking, these things happen at a slow scale, as far as recruitment and future forest. But we do see some, plant community responses, and I assume that there are associated invertebrate responses. We'll see these big flushes of asters in a stand that was burned, or you'll see things express themselves that are not expressed right across, same stand, same forest type, same soils, all that. The only difference is that 4-foot fire line. The other side of it, you won't see that. So, anecdotally, we're seeing those things, and hopefully it'll continue.
Great. Thanks, Russ. I think I'm going to go on to the next question. And I'll mention to folks, we've got about 5 more minutes for Q&A now. And I'll invite speakers that if you want to go into Slido and post replies, that would be great. I don't expect speakers, or they shouldn't feel obligated to reply to every question, but those are there, and I know we're not going to get to them all. Let's go to David. Interesting question here from Mark. David, you suggested that your opportunities for restoration and wildlife management were higher because potential timber value is lower. Does that inverse relationship pertain more broadly across Minnesota forest lands?
That's a great question. And I think it depends a lot on if goals are aligned or conflicting, right? So there are definitely a lot of examples where, being able to do ecological restoration that really relies on disturbance is going to be more possible, or at least an easier thing to fit in with forestry goals if you're not impacting high value forestry stands, right? So understandably, foresters don't necessarily want us deciding that we need to start running a burn unit through like prize top grade, veneer quality walnut. We need to be staying out of there. And maybe if you've got a beautiful walnut plantation that's now 50, 60 years old and getting close to the point of harvesting, maybe that's not a good spot to be going and trying to thin it and underplant to increase diversity. like that's pretty understandable. At the same time, there are certainly instances where, you know, production-based forest management also creates really good habitat, right? So trying to get oak regeneration going when mesification is a widespread landscape concern in southeast Minnesota, that pairs really well. You know, trying to control invasive species so that you can have a better time regenerating a stand, that ties right in. You know, if you've got, if you have, reforestation is another great example, right? It's not hard to sell the idea of planting a mix of hardwood timber species to add habitat to a region, especially in a field that is oddly shaped, hard to find a renter for, and it floods fairly frequently, you know? So I think it just really depends on what the ecological goals would be from a kind of landscape and habitat management perspective, and how that aligns with whether it is good or bad for ultimate timber productivity. And it can happen both ways. You just tend not to notice it when it's in alignment, because then the answer is obvious.
Thanks, David. Let's try to do one more question. I think this one's going to take us back to Steve and Russ. And I'm going to ask you guys to, if you can do this in a minute or two, that'd be great. What kind of follow-up after treatment or harvest do you do to inform adaptive forest management for things other than regeneration?
I guess I can try to take a stab at this. I mean, other than just letting things run their course, you know, we're out, you know, so with regeneration, you know, we're doing some diversification plantings and different cover types. And then we're going back and doing, you know, release work on that stuff as, you know, advanced regeneration comes in, and, you know, whether it's the spruce or balsam, or even on aspen or northern hardwood stands that have a good recruitment of oak coming in, we're going in and doing release work to maintain and enhance those features on those stands. Russ, do you have something else to add in on that?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think that, you know, time will tell on a lot of this stuff. You know, we're not working in prairies, or, you know, I mean, a lot of these things take decades to develop and, you know, see if we did the right thing. You know, one of the things I do like about working on this stuff, on working with this office, is that they do have a variety of approaches to treatments, and instead of, you know, kind of having a common treatment across all similar sites, I think that's a good thing, you know, kind of hedging our bets a little bit, because we don't really, you know, other than the stuff Steve talked about, you know, really it's a long game. It's a long game we're playing.
All right, and with that, I think we need to transition. So let's hear it for our morning speakers. Thanks, you guys. I know I'm the only one anyone can hear clapping, but I know others are appreciative as well. So thank you for that. And again, no obligation, but if you have a moment to go over to Slido, you'll see the link in the chat. And if you want to post any replies there, that'd be great. And thanks for the good questions, folks. We've had a number of really good questions in this session.